where is Nigeria's history? Where did you find Nigeria's history? It seems to me that a lot of Nigeria's history can't be found here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would like you to please say something about that. I'd like you to tell us about how you researched for your books, how you came to the conclusions you reached, your bibliography, your references, and so on. I found those parts very interesting in the 3 books. Where is Nigeria's history?
But I'll preface my comments by sharing with you an experience, personal experience that I had, which I talk about in The Law, the Lawyers, and the Lawless, my autobiography, when I was invited to America as a guest of the US government on their international visitor program. And one of the venues that I had to attend was the State Department in Washington. And there was, I was taken to what was called the Nigeria desk. And the Nigeria desk was a huge room that had more screens, more computers than the heads that we count in this room. It illustrates the point that the information about this country, most of it is outside of our reach. And that was the advantage that I was taking by virtue of the fact that I was living and practicing abroad. I had access to books which would not be accessible here. I did not go to official records. I was writing undercover because my book is, I like to call it a book of revelations, revealing our hidden history. And so the writing had to remain hidden until the project was finished. And so most of the books were bought. I bought them. I read over 80 books. They're listed in the bibliography. I bought most of them. Some of them I borrowed. One I stole. I'm joking. But beg, steal, or borrow. I was on the trail of the information. Because as I said earlier, one dot joins with the next, and the next, and the next. So you've got to follow the trail. So that was my approach. And those were my sources.
Up until the 1st of October 1960, Nigeria was a British colony. And therefore, the best source I found for pre-independence history were in the UK's National Archives, because they are part of the British government's documentation. And so a lot of the information, for example, in my own particular sphere, which is the military, up until April 1958, what we call the Nigerian Army was actually part of West Africa Command of the British Army. And because of my own particular situation, I probably had a unique level of access to that information. One wouldn't be able to do that now in the way that I did before, because we've now got tightened up on data protection laws. But when I was an instructor at Sandhurst, I was able to access the records of a number of very, very prominent Nigerian generals, and I will say no more on the subject. So pre-independence history I found largely in the UK's National Archives. Now, post-independence, up until about the mid-1970s, one of the biggest sources was actually back editions of Nigerian newspapers. And there is a newspaper library, British newspaper library, used to be in Colindale, which has actual copies of newspapers published from all over the world for donkey's years. You see, because they understand, in the way that we don't appear to do, that information is power. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Okay? And if it's not who you know, it's what you know. So information is power. So a lot of that information I also found from there. Now, the third source, and this is this I think is a damning indictment of what I consider to be, and I've said it before and I will say it again, a calculated, cynical crime against humanity to abolish the teaching of history in Nigeria's schools. Cynically done, because if you have a people who do not know where they're coming from, how on earth are they going to work out where they're going to? So that cynical decision made in order to create a population that is much more malleable and therefore manipulable. I refer you back to those statistics I gave you earlier on. 65% of Nigerians are under the age of 25. This is not about us, it's about them. Because our generation may have screwed up, but that does not entitle us to screw up Nigeria for succeeding generations. And the starting point has to be making them be clear who they are, where they've come from. Understand that, they can work out where they're going to.
In Nigeria, we have the National Archives' largest repositories in University of Ibadan. It's typical of Nigerian record keeping. It's not pretty to look at. You find 80-year-old documents on the floor. Some of them have been rained on. Some of us have taken it upon ourselves to photocopy as much as you can and keep them privately by applying to go to the National Archives. A lot of history exists, primary source history exists in places like a cemetery, exists in law reports. I found law reports in the attic of the Lagos High Court of Lagos State with 1872 decisions of Solman LJ. I mean, it's not, they are there, but poorly kept, poorly attended to. But we need to change that. If you go to the site of the National Archives of Nigeria, the website, it announces that archiving has been suspended due to lack of funds. Oh. I mean, it's not even a good advertisement because this is one of our most valuable assets. I keep saying that it's intangible, but it's our most valuable asset. But in the National Archives in Kew Gardens, a lot of primary sources, colonial papers, a lot of the exchanges, the letters colonial officers were sending back home. You have to understand that during the colonial period, there were 3 competing offices in the British government, and they didn't like themselves. The Imperial Treasury, the Colonial Office, and the Foreign Office. They did not like each other, and they competed endlessly. Nigeria is a product of the Foreign Office, not the Colonial Office. And it shows up, maybe I'll go into that later on, but it shows up in the way we're constructed. Many colonies were created by the Colonial Office. But we were created by the Foreign Office and then handed over to the Colonial Office. So the National Archives in Colindale, the National Newspaper Library, is part of the British Library. I carry a card of the British Library. The newspaper archives, they've been shut down due to Cameron's cuts. And all the newspapers have been taken to places in Yorkshire. But you can still access them by application, just a longer process. While I was going to the newspaper library, I had to buy 60 years of the Lagos Weekly Record because they were going to take those cartons away, in weeks to come, and I needed access to it. I've since donated that to the archives in Lagos State that you can find at Magodo in Omole, and I hope that's a good home for them. That they're being looked after. Please check. But you can find Lagos Weekly Record from as old as 1873, and they've been kept in microfiche. And you can visit. It's a public place. I have a private copy, so if you want some, you can come and see me. But yeah, the history can be found in many places. Depends on what you're looking for. But there's history in Nigeria, but it's badly kept. We need to improve that.
We'll be showing you more next week and subsequently. But before I sign out, let me remind senior secondary school students that the national essay competition we are organizing is still on. Please visit www.channelstv.com/bookclub to get all the information you need for the competition. Entries are open till 15th of September 2018, so you better hurry up. As always, we look forward to getting your feedback through any of our social media platforms displayed on your screen. I am Olakunle Kasumu. Remember, one great book can change your life. Bye-bye.